Social media users in Kenya are protesting the surge in food prices and other basic commodities in the country. With the hashtag lower food prices, the topic has been leading the trends on Twitter for the past 2 days and has also dominated local media, according to sources. Some social media users showed evidence of shopping lists, which stated with prices of basic commodities like bread and cooking oil, which has shot up in the last 3 years, with some goods twice or three times more expensive. The issue may mount a lot of pressure on the government, especially as the country's elections are due in August. They are calling out the government for failing to curb the ever rising prices. Higher taxes and increased costs of production, including that of farm outputs, have been blamed for pushing up prices. The Kenyan Statistics Bureau's latest data shows that year on year food inflation rose by 8.89% in January. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, global food prices rise in January. Vegetable oils and dairy products were the major drivers of this. Police in Kenya said that they had arrested 238 people during violent protests over the cost of living, which also saw 31 police officers injured. Protesters had joined demonstrations in Nairobi and other parts of Kenya on Monday in response to a call by veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga. It was the first major unrest since President William Ruto took office in September last year, narrowly beating Odinga in an election his rival claims was stolen. Odinga had called for the day of action, blaming the government for the economic woes faced by Kenyans. They are battling high prices for food and fuel, a plunging currency, and a record drought that has left millions hungry. Police fired tear gas and water cannon against demonstrators, some of whom were hurling rocks and burning tires, as well as against Odinga's motorcade. On Monday, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua urged the organizers to call off the mayhem and the chaos, saying the protests had cost Kenya about $15 million in lost businesses. But Odinga has vowed to not let up the action, calling for protests and strikes to be held every Monday until the cost of living comes down. In January, the overall inflation rate in the country fell slightly for the second straight month to 5%, but the prices of basic commodities like maize flour, wheat flour, potatoes, vegetables, and fruits continued rising, which may disproportionately impact low and middle income households. Food inflation for the month of January stood at 9%, meaning many Kenyans struggle to put food on the table. The Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics (KNBS) says for poorer households where food accounts for about 36% of total spending, the burden is even higher. Many people shared their shopping lists, detailing how prices of basic food items like milk, bread, sugar, and maize flour had spiked sharply in recent months, making it difficult for them to afford 3 meals a day. But while the frustration on social media was collective, the financial squeeze is more painful on a personal level. Benandine Munira, a trader in Nairobi Toy's open-air market, says she is struggling to put food on the table as her monthly household budget cannot buy as much as it could a few months ago. The prices of goods have really gone up. We cannot take it anymore. A few months ago, refilling a 6 kilogram or 13 pounds of cooking gas cylinder was between $5 to $6. Today, it's about $13, she says. Back then, with a shopping list of $26, you would leave with a box full of goods. Today, the same amount gives you just a few items. The increase in the cost of living can be attributed to a combination of external and domestic factors. Under pressure from the International Monetary Fund or the IMF to raise more revenue, the government has increased taxes on everyday household goods such as cooking gas, fuel, and food. For instance, value-added tax or VAT was not applied to cooking gas for many years, but a levy of 16% was imposed in July 2021, partly because of the effects of COVID-19, which hit tourism and exports. The Kenyan shilling has been losing value by about 6% since May 2021, pushing up the prices of all imported goods. The pandemic has also disrupted global supply chains, making it more expensive and tedious to access and move goods and services across borders. Nikhil Hira, a tax expert at Nairobi-based firm Cody Africa LLP, says, there is no doubt that today the cost of living has spiraled beyond control, and it's difficult particularly for those who live on a daily wage, and without that daily wage, they cannot eat at night. outside the city, it's even worse. A prolonged drought in the country's north has left an estimated 2.8 million facing severe hunger. In the short term, the government may be able to bring some respite by lowering VAT on regular household goods like cooking gas, cooking oil, and food. But it must develop a fresh tax policy that adapts to changing needs. The Petroleum Ministry is already drawing from a subsidy scheme to allow the government to compensate oil marketers for rises in petroleum prices in order to shield consumers. The Energy Ministry has also been implementing a phased 30% reduction in electricity costs since December 2021 in order to cushion consumers. The issue of price rises is bound to play a big role in August general elections. One of the favorites to succeed, President Uhuru Kenyatta, Deputy William Ruto, is promising a food-secure nation. While on the campaign trail in December, he said, "We will put enough money in agriculture, produce enough food, reduce the cost of seeds and the cost of fertilizer. Reduce the cost of food so that we can lower the cost of living in Kenya, so that we can ensure every Kenyan can feed his family." While his main rival, Raila Odinga, is pledging a social protection program targeting about 2 million unemployed and vulnerable Kenyans who will receive about $55 a month. A nation's greatness is judged by how it feels its poor and vulnerable, he said. But Kenyans should remember that Mr. Kenyatta himself made similar promises in 2013 when he launched his presidential campaign. The scourge of poverty and unemployment still stalks our nation, robbing millions of hope. 70% of our youth in Kenya do not have jobs. We need to create jobs for our youth, and securing them will be my priority. The World Bank projects that the country's economy will grow 5% in 2022. But beyond these headline figures, Kenyans want to feel the growth on a personal level. The upcoming protests have already caused concern among business owners in the capital, Nairobi, with many expected to close their shops as tensions rise. Responding to Odinga's call, Ruto said that he would not allow the opposition leader to incite violence in the country. However, he promised to protect all protesters and those who will not participate in demonstrations. Simultaneous opposition protests were set in March 20 in 6 African countries, including Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, Gambia, Tunisia, and South Africa, albeit with different objectives. Kenya's opposition leader Raila Odinga called on his supporters to come out in large numbers to take part in countrywide protests on Monday to demand that President William Ruto lowers the cost of living. Since Ruto was sworn in 6 months ago, he has continued to run this country with a lot of contempt. Many Kenyans cannot bear the cost of living. Many people are dying because of lack of food. Odinga said during a rally in Nairobi. Odinga, who lost the presidential election for a 5th time in August, called for nationwide protests to demonstrate against what he claims, without evidence, is an illegitimate government that stole the election. Kilifi County Senator Stuart Madzayo and Ujunja Sub-County lawmaker Opio Wandai were among those arrested and held in Nairobi, according to Odinga's senior advisor Mutua. 6 other officials were also arrested in the capital, he confirmed to CNN, adding the party was still trying to assess the number of arrests.